Hi everyone, this is PM Mixing and Mastering. My name is Peter Muller and I'm a mixing and mastering engineer. I'm running a studio out of Germany, Europe for clients worldwide. I decided to start my own channel on YouTube to talk about subjects related to the pro audio studio world, like mixing, mastering, recording, tutorials and gear reviews. Alright, so let's dive into the first video. I'm starting with a gear review about a compressor limiter by Manley. Let's get to it. Welcome back. I'm sure you heard the name Manley before if you're interested in pro audio. Based in California, USA, Manley is one of the most important manufacturers of pro audio hardware in the world. Until today, Manley Laboratories, run by the Tube Queen Eve Anna Manley, continues to produce equipment of the very highest caliber in the tradition of analog recording, mixing and mastering. And all of this is done in-house and handmade in California. Now, when the transition from analog to digital finally happened throughout the 90s, Manley continued to build high-end studio hardware, mainly based on tubes, and their success became even bigger, because even or especially in the digital age, most of the important studios worldwide are looking for that coloration, saturation, this extra and original analog touch, which makes your mixes sound really finished, glued together and radio ready. In the last years, hybrid recording, mixing and mastering environments became very popular, and a lot of studios use a piece of gear made by Manley, for example the Voxbox, Force, Core, Massive Passive, Slam, Elope and many more. But their most successful product according to their website is the Variable Mu, which is around since 1994. Vari compression, as Manley names it, goes way back to the Fairchild compressors of the 50s. The Nu Mu, the compressor limiter I will review in this video, is not the follow-up of the Variable Mu. It's a new concept on its own, using basically the same front end but a different output stage. Let's take a look. So this is the Manley Nu Mu. Very cool design, typical Manley look in blue and black. And in the center there's a unique feature, a round stereo blue backlit VU meter. Let's take a closer look at the front panel. Up left you have output, threshold, below that attack and recovery, and the right channel is mirrored, which is a bit strange in the beginning, but you get used to it after a while. This is the inner section. You can see 6 lighted push button switches. Up left you can choose between compression and limiting. Below that is the on-off button, and then the link button, where you can control the unit from the left side, but here you have to take care because it only affects the threshold, attack and release control. So you have to set the output control separately. The button on the upper right is called hip. The hip function is a new invention by Manley, which has a similar effect as parallel compression. I will show that to you later in the video and have some examples how it changes the sound. Below that you have the meter select button, where you can decide if you want to display the amount of gain reduction or the output level. The last button is called HPSC, which means high pass sidechain. The switch engages a 6 dB octave 100 Hz high pass sidechain filter, which is very useful for bass heavy material. And finally in the center you see 2 toggle switches, one for each channel, where you can choose the input level. You can choose between -3, 0 and +3 dB. The build quality is excellent, just as you would expect from a company like Manley. And you have 3 non-dependent potentiometers for threshold, attack and output, and a 5-position rotary switch for recovery, which means release. And of course the toggle switches for the input level. The push buttons light up very well, so even in daylight conditions you can clearly see what's going on. And let's take a look at the rear panel. You have balanced XLR ins and outs for each channel, and 1/4 inch input jacks for sidechain. You can insert external gear here, and the mains connector, which is a universal supply. So you can use it anywhere in the world, from 90 volts to 250 volts. Okay, but can you really use it for dual mono compression with the limitations mentioned before? Yes, you can. With the attack, recovery, threshold and input level separately, you can easily use two mono sources with the Nu Mu. It's true that the center section only applies to both channels, but does that really matter? I don't think so. Here's an example. If you send a kick drum on channel 1 and a snare drum on channel 2, you probably want to use the high-pass sidechain to keep the low end of the kick punchy enough. Now if you apply it, it will also be activated on channel 2. But a sidechain with a cutoff below 100 Hz will not do any harm to the snare drum, because you would close the EQ section in that range anyway when you mix a snare. The hip function is not really useful on single tracks in my opinion. I would use it on the bass, drum bass or mix bass, but I will demonstrate this to you in a moment. So I think the functionality of the Nu Mu for stereo and dual mono is realistic and very well thought out. Before we move on, let's remember the very basics of variable mu compression. I think it's important to know a few points to understand the Nu Mu better. So what is variable mu compression? The gain reduction circuit is centered around vacuum tubes. The tube is not used as an amplifier in the makeup gain stage, like in other tube compressors. But the tube itself is the gain reduction component. It's a special class of tubes you need for this. They are called remote cutoff tubes. The input signal has an effect on the bias voltage of the tube. Increasing the input signal increases the ratio of gain reduction. Mu means gain, variable gain. The amount of compression is dependent on the input level. That's called program dependent. The characteristics of vari-mu compression are soft knee, tube coloration, harmonic distortion and saturation. And it has relatively slow attack and release times. So the interesting question is, what makes the Nu Mu different to the variable mu? It's a hybrid concept. It's the same T-bar front end, but a solid state output stage. A transformerless output, and the shortest attack time is almost twice as fast. More versatile for faster material like electronic dance music. It's cleaner, more subtle coloration. It retains the material crisp and punchy, and it has a new hip function, which essentially achieves the effect of parallel compression. I know studio people are always interested in specs, and I want to list some of them, not all. If you want to know everything, every specification, you have to go to the Manley website and check the manual. I think what is important is the ratio compress mode, which we have here 1.2 to 1 to 3 to 1. And the limiter mode is 1.5 to 1 to 12 to 1. So you can see the compression is quite moderate and the limiter is not a brick wall limiter. Attack times, depending on the gain reduction, are surprisingly fast, twice as fast as the variable mu. And yeah, two pairs of handmade 6BA6 vacuum tubes, remote cutoff tubes. The famous Manley iron input transformers. And there you can see the maximum input level and the gain makeup. For more specs, as I said before, please go to the Manley website and you find all the numbers and values. Okay, so we can say that the Nu Mu is a modern interpretation of the variable mu. According to the Manley website, it is like a clean version of it, especially suited for modern digital productions where you don't necessarily need to color or mask the sound like it was necessary in the early days of digital, where the converter quality was not as good as today. The fat solid state amplifying an output stage makes the audio path faster and punchier. Now let's find out in practice how it sounds like. The Nu Mu sits in my rack on the inside of an SSL Fusion, and of course the Fusion is bypassed, so you can only hear the Nu Mu at work. The signal comes directly from the DA converter, which is a Crane Song Solaris, and after the Nu Mu it goes straight to the AD with a Burl B2 bomber. When I activate the Nu Mu, you will also see the settings I used written out at the top. So let's start with some lead vocals. This is a track I recorded quite a while ago. It's called Golden Rules, sung by Nick Gibbs, and was released on my last album, No Mind. And what you see here on the waveform is that it has a lot of dynamics, quiet and louder parts. To keep this in control, we have many possibilities in the studio, many types of compressors, and also maybe a tool like a vocal rider. But yeah, let's find out what the Nu Mu does to the sound and start some critical listening.
The drifting wings flapping, holding on to speeding through the fireflies. Will open wide Whoa, they burn, whoa, they bite. Appear into kaleidoscopic fray, they fade away. The drifting wings flapping, holding on to speeding through the fireflies. Will open wide, whoa, they burn, whoa, they bite. Appear into kaleidoscopic fray, they fade away.
Next up is bass guitar. This is the wave file of the track, and you see the first section is uncompressed and the second is with the Nu Mu activated. Now let's hear what happens. Now let's check out the Manley on the drum bass. We have a full kit here where the single tracks are already compressed and EQ'd, but we want to add some extra mix glue to the sound. Before we go ahead, let's reflect on what we heard. You can notice on all examples how smooth the Nu Mu acts. The way it evens out the dynamic differences in the lead vocal and adds a silky smooth touch on the top end is really impressing to me. It also evens out the attack on the bass guitar and makes the level more consistent while adding a touch of warmer and fuller sound. On the drum kit I had the high pass sidechain activated to preserve the punch of the kick. When I turned on the unit, the whole drum bass became tighter and more glued together. The next example shows how the hip function works. You will hear the mix bus of the full track from which you heard the drums and the bass before. First is the A part where the compressor settings work pretty well. But when the tune goes to the B part, the dynamic of the tune causes a slight pumping. When I activate the hip function, the problem is instantly gone. This is because the hip function is allowing compression to happen at lower levels while keeping the dynamics in the louder sections and compressing the signal overall. You get louder soft sections and original dynamics of the louder sections without damage of the exciting transients. This effect is similar to that of parallel compression, but with only a push of a button. Now to something more extreme, to show you how the hip function can also work as an emergency button or lifesaver for settings that cause pumping and damage of the transients. I will use the same drum take you heard earlier in this video, but this time I will set the attack and release to the fastest position and the threshold to 9 o'clock. It's pretty impressive how easy it is to solve a common problem that normally needs way more time when you use parallel compression, because you have to find a sweet spot which sounds great on the overall material. Parallel or New York compression, as some people call it, became very hip in mixing, but it seems that this unique feature by Manley can be the new hip. Now as the last example, I will use the limiter function. Maybe you remember the vocal track from the beginning, and now I will use the complete version of the tune Golden Rules as I mixed it back then and send it through the Nu Mu. This way you can hear what the Nu Mu does to the sound if you use it as a limiter in a mastering chain. However, I did not push the output level as high as I would do it in a mastering situation. The reason is that it's easier for you to compare what's really happening with the sound without being distracted by a huge increase in loudness when I turn the unit on. Let's get to it.
Golden rules etched into my sleepy head in bed. The drifting wings flapping, holding on to speeding through the fireflies, open wide. Kaleidoscopic frame, they fade away. Golden rules etched into my sleepy head in bed. The drifting wings flapping.
Also with the limiter function, you can notice how the mix is glued together, opens up in the top end and sounds fatter and warmer. So what's my conclusion? I think with the Nu Mu, Manley did a clever update of Vari compression to make it fit in a modern hybrid studio environment. With a little less coloration but faster attack than the classic variable mu, it becomes very versatile on all kinds of material, gives that mix glue and sparkle in the top end, as well as fatness and warmth in the lower frequencies. It seems that everything you put through the Nu Mu, like vocals, bass, drums, guitars or the mix bus, gets that final touch which you can't get from a plug-in. That makes the Nu Mu very usable in everyday studio work, like mixing, mastering and even recording. The only limitation I see is on very fast material in extreme scenarios like strong pumping effects, where you would need negative ratios, etc. It also won't work as a brick wall limiter, so if you use the Nu Mu for mastering to benefit from the sound, you might have to put another brick wall limiter behind it. But this is a very common situation in mastering anyway. What's also interesting is the price point, which sits slightly below 3,000 euros at the moment. Of course, that's still a lot of money, but considering the fact that you get a high-end studio hardware, handmade in the USA, that really makes a difference to your sound, it's a very good deal. So that's it for now. I hope you found some useful information that can help you to make better decisions about your next gear. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so you will get notified when I upload the next video. See you next time.